One of the most important elections of our generation is coming up, and it's not the presidential election. This is a election for the U.S. Senate, and today I have one of the candidates with me, Ed Case. He's been on the show before, and every time he comes on the show, he gets into trouble. So we wanted to welcome him back because certainly it helps boost our ratings. We did invite former Governor Linda Lingle and Congresswoman Mazie Hirono as well, but hopefully in the future we'll be able to have a debate or actually have all three of you on at the same time.
I would absolutely welcome that.
I know you would.
Early and
that's
often.
the fun part. I know, early and often, exactly. Okay, so
my life has been way too boring, so I figured it was time to get on your show again.
Good. Okay, so tell me what's going on with you? You've been traveling the state. You've been fundraising. You've been listening to people, more importantly, about what their concerns are. You're doing talk stories and things like that. And what are you hearing from the community about what the problems are right now?
Well, I think number one, really just an absolute disenchantment and concern and disillusionment, disappointment, disgust, anger with Washington, D.C. I think that's really universal. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican. I don't care what you are. It doesn't matter what island you're on. It doesn't matter whether you're, whatever part of society. There's a genuine concern that what's happening in Washington right now is not just a little kind of disagreement that will blow over after a time, but a structural problem with governance in our country that needs to be overcome. And I think that obviously we have seen tremendous deterioration in confidence in government, even since I was last in office. And 2002 to 2007, when I was serving Hawaii in the U.S. Congress, was not a very good time for public confidence in government, but the depths to which it's fallen since then through a number of reasons, all amounting to a lack of leadership at the end of the day, have really hurt public confidence. We've been out there, I've been out there actually when I was in Congress. I believed very, very strongly in staying in touch with my community, and I did about 172 talk stories across my district. Just straight up, whoever wants to come, let's talk. I'll tell you what's happening in Washington. You tell me what's on your mind. We'll have a discussion. We'll talk story. And I went back to that in this campaign. I just got back last weekend from about 24 across the state, all of the islands, and they were just fantastic opportunities to share concerns, and that's what I got back in spades.
So you're talking about confidence and public opinion. I've watched over the years Congress having a popularity rating of 13%, 9%. You thought, how could it possibly go any lower than 9%? Well, I read a poll the other day that was 6% confidence. 6% of the public think that Congress is doing a good job. And, it's like, how can it even go lower than that? I don't want to ask that because it'll probably go lower, but
well, what's behind that? It's kind of like in science. I never really understood the concept of absolute zero in terms of temperature, but
right.
It's supposed to be where it cannot get any colder.
Right, exactly. So what's behind that, do you think?
Well, I fundamentally believe, of course, we are in a very tough time in our country.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very, very tough generational issues. You led with an observation that this was one of the most important elections in a generation. And I think it's one of the most important election years for our country in a generation, because we do have generational challenges in our economy and in kind of restarting our economy. We certainly have a generational challenge going on with our budget and getting our federal finances in order. We have incredible generational questions and challenges in foreign policy, in preserving Social Security and Medicare. And I think these are all big enough challenges that would make any election important. What distinguishes this one, though, is that people don't think that Congress and their federal government are solving those challenges. It's not necessarily about how the challenges are solved. I think people are perfectly willing and able to accept a certain level of disagreement with what their government actually decides to do, but they want it to be decided. And they want it to be decided in an inclusive way, where they feel that their perspective is listened to, that it's not just like, one perspective with a D after it, or one perspective with an R after it, or one perspective with a, Wall Street after it, or non-Wall Street after it. Get together, solve the problems. So I use the analogy a lot of times. It's a little bit like being an air traffic controller, and you've got planes that you've got to land those planes. If you stack the planes up, you get yourself in a lot of mess. You've got to land the planes to keep things flowing. And we haven't landed any of these issues. And as a result, they're just stacked up. And, sooner or later, you got to replace the controllers.
That's true.
I don't want to take it too far, but
Right.
I think that's really what's bugging people more than, and it bugs me. That's how I feel. And so I go around having my talk stories and walking Main Street, Kaunakakai, and tree lighting festival in Lanai City, and the Sunday morning market in Puna. It's all the same. But everybody says, I don't know who those 6% are that think, think
Yeah,
they're
me
actually.
too. I don't know either.
They're not around.
Right.
So I think we really do need fundamentally a change in governance in Washington, and I think that's what people are looking for.
Now, we hear all this talk about the budget and whether or not taxes should be raised or whether or not the budget should be capped or cut. And there's this big fighting right now. We had the super committee, which wasn't so super after all. It didn't find a resolution on time. So what do you think about that? You've been talking for a long time about the budget issues.
I have been talking for a long time about the budget issues. When I went into Congress in 2002, at the end of 2002, we could see at the time that things were going in the wrong direction. Of course, at the time, our president, then President Bush, and his administration and others were saying that don't worry about it. Let's not worry about a huge deficit that we have, and hey, we can afford to go into Iraq and Afghanistan, and reduce federal revenues at the same time. We'll grow our way out of it. And I just thought, no, I don't buy that economics. I mean, that's voodoo economics, to borrow an old term, in all honesty. And just in the time that I was in Congress, when I did serve on the House Budget Committee, so I sat through a number of budget cycles, I just saw an incredible deterioration in the federal budget. And in the year 2000, we actually ran a surplus in our federal government. By the time I got there, we were running $300 billion a year, $400 billion a year, $500 billion a year. Now it's $1.3 trillion a year in terms of the current deficit. $1.3 trillion. Difference between income and expenses. $1.3 trillion. That's a lot of zeros. I think that national debt, because that all gets tacked onto the national debt. When I went into Congress, it was somewhere in the range of $5 trillion. We just passed through $15 trillion. So obviously this is unsustainable.
Right.
It is. We've just had the three worst budget years in our history by some measures, and the degree of absolute simplicity coming out of Washington in terms of the discussion of the budget is what really bothers me more than anything else. One side, to take the extreme, says, well, this is such a deep problem that the only way we can, solve this problem is by reducing government, slashing the cost of government. The other side says, well, the only way we can do this is by raising taxes. And the fact of the matter is, if you raised taxes only on the revenue side to solve this problem, you would destroy an economy. And if you reduced government spending by the same amount to actually balance this budget over time, you'd probably destroy government, or at least what I think of as government. I realize some people don't like government to start with.
Yeah.
I don't dislike government. I just think it needs to operate affordably and efficiently, and focusing on the core functions of government. So I'm not an anti-government guy, but I don't want government to be slashed that much. It really has to be a combination. Now, the super committee came together, and then, of course, we have what the Congressional Budget Office refers to accurately as structural changes in our federal finances and budget. So in other words, it's not just a matter of swinging on an economic cycle. These are deeper structural challenges that we have to meet, primarily related to the fact that we're getting older and that the costs of taking care of ourselves through Social Security and Medicare are growing as a percentage of our gross national product and the number of people that are still working. That's a structural change. So what I have really been disgusted about, to use that word, is a failure to confront reality in Washington, first of all, and a failure to try to fashion a solution that really fairly spreads the responsibility and consequences across as many of us as possible, rather than pick out or single out any one group to bear the brunt of the burden, because that's not the right way to do this. We really are all in this together. We've got to get out together. Mm-hmm.
So we've heard all about this super committee, and it wasn't so super. We had a cartoon this week that showed the super committee with a super cape running into a wall and going splat kind of thing. Where are we with that? Is it going to continue? Do you see them making progress, or is it going to be because they have 6 on one side and 6 on the other, like you were saying, with completely different opinions, they're not going to make any progress?
Well, it's a little hard to tell because we're a little early still after the supercommittee's failure. What was set up in the law that created the supercommittee were some pretty severe consequences if the supercommittee failed. That's kind of the good news. The consequences are not the good news. The consequences were very, very deep cuts to many parts of government, of which the Defense Department bore the largest brunt. Now, personally, I think those cuts are, in the way that they were structured, unreasonable as a policy matter. So I don't want those cuts to go into effect. So in some ways, the good news was that they created a pretty severe hammer if they failed. The bad news was that most of those don't take effect until the end of next year. So in other words, I think what the supercommittee calculated, and I don't think it was the right calculation, was, well, this is just too tough for us to pull off right now, but we do have a year to fix it. That's really the wrong way to go about it. I don't want to wait another year to get this problem solved. Now, what we see right now is I think somewhat encouraging, and a number of senators and representatives stepping forward in the wake of the supercommittee's failure to offer their own bipartisan solutions. And of course, let's also remember that we've had at least 2 bipartisan, high-powered groups come up with bipartisan solutions to the budget. One appointed by the president himself, the National Committee on the Deficit Reduction and Fiscal Responsibility, called the Simpson-Bowles Commission, and then, of course, the Gang of 6 in the Senate. Now, I may disagree with some of the specifics of their proposals, but they put together something that worked. So I'm hopeful that the public outcry against the failure of the supercommittee will actually encourage folks in the Senate to step forward and lead.
So the biggest issue right now, don't you think, facing our country, they're jobs. Is that what you're hearing out in the community when you go around, that you're hearing that people want to work and they aren't able to find jobs, things like that?
The biggest specific issue, again, I'd go back to the fact that I think for most people the biggest issue in our country right now is the failure of governance in Washington, D.C. But if you want to talk about very specific issues, absolutely. The economy and job maintenance and creation. Fundamentally trying to jumpstart an economy again and stabilize an economy. Not so much jumpstart anymore, but stabilize and grow an economy so that we can keep the jobs that we still have and grow the jobs that we don't yet have and compete in a pretty competitive world. That is the number one issue.
So what are some of the top of mind issues other than jobs and the economy, or is that just taking the lead on everything?
Well, that certainly is number one, and I've already talked about the other number one, which is well, no, that's kind of the umbrella issue. Now let's talk about specific issues. Jobs in the economy, certainly, our national budget, certainly, and those are very linked. Okay, so let's not pretend we can put them in stovepipes or anything like that. The third issue that is of great concern to many people is the physical stability of Medicare and Social Security, on which many folks depend for, in some cases, their very lives. And it's an incredible, surprising number of folks out there for whom Medicare is their only source of health care, for whom Social Security is their only source of income. So it's of great concern that the actuarial projections on Medicare and Social Security today show them as pretty difficult to sustain over time, and that should be of great concern to us all. I believe in Medicare and Social Security. I don't want them to, fail, and I'm not going to let them fail. But like all of the problems and challenges that I've ever faced, and I'm sure you're the same way, whether they be personal or in government, you usually want to get on them right away, as opposed to kicking them down the road. Budget's a perfect example. If we had made some very basic decisions on the budget in 5 years ago even, we would not be where we are today. Not even given the recession. If we had made the decisions, we would not be where we are today. I don't want to do that with Medicare and Social Security when I know what the solutions are to fix them.
What do you think the solutions
Social Security, in both the cases of Medicare and Social Security, they're really about balancing income and expenses as people are getting older and there's fewer people in the workforce to pay for the people that are getting older. So you have to kind of rebalance the income stream over time, if I can put it that way. On the Social Security side, I think that we definitely do need to raise the payroll limit at this point, which basically says if you make more than $106,000, that portion over $106,000 is not subject to a Social Security tax, and that's too old now and out of date, and we simply need to change that. Medicare is a little tougher because with Medicare, the biggest challenge is the escalation in healthcare costs, 5 to 10% inflation over, so in other words, well over inflation, and you can't sustain 5 to 10% growth in medical costs over time. That's what's killing Medicare. And so, either some competition is inserted into this medical delivery industry, or government has to step in, I think, and try to make sure that those costs are contained. And I don't hold out hope in this situation. I don't like government to get involved in business, but if business is growing too fast for a government-provided service, of course you have to step in with cost controls.
So what about, you're running for U.S. Senate, you're aiming to replace U.S. Senator Daniel Akaka, and you're running against two well-known, we'll see what happens with the race with Congresswoman Hirono. And so tell me a little bit about what you think the main differences are between you and her, and how do you think your campaign's going?
Well, I think our campaign's going very well, first of all. I think we have had an awesome couple of months here since I announced. I think fundamentally what people are looking for in this election is a change in governance in Washington. And I think that we do offer the right blend of change that people are looking for. And so I know that as I've gone out and talked, just as I'm talking to you, that has been resonating with folks. They realize we've got to do this differently. They realize the partisan warfare is not going to work. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm a Democrat. I'm proud of being a Democrat, and I'm going to bring my principles to bear on that. But that doesn't mean that I don't get out there and try to problem solve. For some, the party thing is the first and only thing they look at. It's not me. So I think we've done very well out there in the campaign trail, and we've gotten great grassroots support and great resonance as we've gone out. Major differences between me and Mazie. 3 or 4 things that probably leap out. I think she really is a product of the status quo, and I'm not. And so basically, if you like the way things are, she's probably a more comfortable candidate for you. If you think we need to do some basic change, then you're not going to get it from that side of the choice. But I certainly believe in it. So that's a major difference between us. I think another major difference is that I've worked in the private sector for 30 years. So I basically have been in the business world for all of those 30 years, represented businesses as a lawyer, run 2 businesses myself. And I think when you're talking about economy and jobs and budgets, it's kind of helpful to have a background in business and balancing the checkbook, and that's something she doesn't have. I think that she is very much, although we are both Democrats, I think we're different kind of Democrats. I think she really fits into the category of first, foremost, and only a Democrat. And as I've said already, I am a Democrat, but I don't think that that's the end of my responsibility. And I don't think that the problems of our country are going to be solved just because we have more D's than R's there or more R's than D's there. I don't think that's what it's going to take to fix this country. And I think that we have different political philosophies. We both tend to be quite liberal on social issues. But I think I'm fairly characterized as a little bit more moderate than she is on economic issues, on foreign policy issues. I think Mazie is ranked as about the sixth most liberal member of the House out of 435. So that's...
Why did she make it to 6? I thought she'd be number 1.
Because there's some more liberal people out there than she is.
Okay.
It's a close battle.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you that.
So I think that, and I think finally, I think we do have a different outlook in terms of staying in touch. Mm-hmm. I think I've focused, like I said earlier, on trying to stay in touch with my constituents through talk stories and otherwise. And I think that she hasn't done as much of that. So I think we have a different outlook on what the job entails in terms of constituent interaction.
One of the criticisms I hear about Congresswoman Hirono is that people aren't sure what she's done, and they ask me, what has she done? And so, is that something that you hear when you go out and pound the pavement?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. That's a good.
I don't want
answer.
to tell you anything else.
Okay, you can save that for your commercials. Okay, so I guess the other thing is that you're going to have this big race with her coming up, and you've as you mentioned, she's very liberal, and she has the support of the current delegation that's in office now. So how do you overcome that as a Democrat when you're running in a Democrat election and trying to overcome that kind of power on her side and endorsement on her side? I mean, we saw, Senator Inoue, who's our top dog right now in Hawaii and has been for a long time, campaigning for Congresswoman Hanabusa, and that did actually have an impact in the end when she won. So how do you overcome that kind of power against you?
Well, first of all, I don't think that I don't think it's correct that she has the support of the delegation.
Oh,
I think she has
okay.
certainly, Senator Inoue has certainly indicated his preference for her, but to my knowledge, that's the only person that has indicated a preference on the delegation.
Okay.
I think a couple of things. First of all, I don't believe that folks are going to make their decision on that basis. I think that they are very comfortable, as am I, with Senator Inoue being my senator. And I want him to go on as long as he possibly can. And I want to be his junior partner. And I mean that in the sense of he's the leader of this delegation. But I do think that folks are much more independent in their voting views. And I think that everything we talked about is going to be what they decide this race on, not on a preference by an individual, even the senior senator. So I think that. Obviously I wish he had stayed neutral, but as he hasn't, I think that's up to people to decide, and I think they're going to decide it. I think they factor it in, and then they go on from there. I do think that, first of all, I mean, I had a wonderful working relationship with him when I was in office for 2002 to 2007, and by the way, that included 1 year in which I was running against Senator Akaka. During that year, the delegation actually got a lot done. Now, they were all opposing me. But that didn't mean we didn't get things done for Hawaii. That was a big year. We had a lot of tough issues then. And you know what? If you look at the U.S. Senate, each state has 2 senators. And if you take a look, actually, at each of those pairings, you will find a lot of situations in which folks didn't support each other for office, sometimes even ran against each other. Now, in none of those situations are you going to find people trying to wipe the other person out and not work together. They're all working for their state. So I have absolutely no concerns in terms of, working with Senator Inoue. And I think also one of the reasons that this is such an important race, generational race, as you called it, for Hawaii, is that given the fact that we don't tend, as I found out the hard way, don't tend to unelect our senators once we elect them. Probably the next senator is going to serve a generation and will eventually undertake the duties and responsibilities of being the senior senator from Hawaii and leading the delegation in a post-Inoue world. And I think that is something that voters are going to think about at the end of the day. This isn't just about being the junior senator. This is about leadership over time. And I think certainly there's some contrast between me and my opponents along those lines.
Now, whoever wins your election is going to run against former Governor Lingle because she's a Republican. So how do you think that's going to play out? Like if, for example, you win, how do you feel about that in terms of beating former Governor Lingle?
Well, I think I feel very, very good about that. I think that I think we match up very, very well against Governor Lingle. I think that I'll go back to the point I made earlier. I think people are looking for change. And I think they're going to vote for change. I do think that most folks in Hawaii do tend to believe that, to put it in a partisan perspective, do tend to be Democrats, do tend to believe more in the Democrat than the Republican principles. do tend to be a little spooked by the extreme Republican politics in Washington, which is a little unlike the Republican politics here.
Very
And-
unlike the
Yeah, I was
Republicans.
being
We're very-
kind.
Yeah, the Republicans here are Democrat-like.
And so I think that, you know, if folks out there have a choice between change with a D and change with an R, they're going to take change with a D. But to answer the question you're about to ask me, they're going to vote for change. So if the nominee is Congresswoman Hirono, then I think Governor Lingle will win.
Okay. Well, you are.
That one got me in trouble. I was tracking the trouble meter, and there were a couple of times when it spiked up to about 7 or 8. That last one went to 9.5.
That one's
Yeah.
going to be on the commercial, right, against you.
Well, I've said it publicly, so it's not like the first time I've said it.
Right. So what are the plans for you now? You're out there, you're fundraising, you're doing talk stories. You know, I've watched the different, you know, Congresswoman Hirono and former Governor Lingle going from place to place and fundraising. I've seen Governor Lingle in different events in this last week in the mainland, and same with Congresswoman Hirono's been having fundraisers with union members here, union leaders, and also our congressional Senator Inoue attending. So what kind of you know, she has a big power base in terms of fundraising. So how do you kind of overcome that?
You got to get out on the grassroots. Well, first of all, we're obviously fundraising too, so I don't want to make it sound like we don't care about fundraising. We obviously care about fundraising.
Right.
But it's pretty obvious at this point that I'm going to be outraised and outspent in both the primary and, if we get through the primary, most likely the general. I mean, Governor Lingle herself said she's going to go find $8 to $10 million on the mainland
Right.
to ship that money into Hawaii and spend it here. There's not $8 to $10 million in Hawaii to spend on a Senate campaign, so you know where that's coming from. Congresswoman Hirono has hit up the special interest community inside of Washington pretty hard. She's getting about 38% of her contributions from special interest PAC money. I think I'm up to about 1.5%.
Ooh, good job.
So you know, we obviously need to raise the financial resources to deliver a campaign. But I'm fortunate, I think, in that from all indications, from polls we've done and others, as well as just walking around the state, you know, we have the same or better overall, name recognition than the other two. I know from all polls now we have better favorability and lower unfavorability than the other two, and that's always a good place to be because there's more room for growth there. So for me, it's about hitting the grassroots, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to walk this state, we're going to talk in small places, and we're going to ask for debates, yes.
All right, debates. We'll have one on our show. Can you believe it? We're already out of time. I want to welcome you. I want to thank you for coming on the show again, and I appreciate you always showing up and sharing with the viewers what's going on. This has been Malia Zimmerman, and I want to look forward to more shows with Ed Case and more debates. Aloha.